Well, this is the third BZ principle of the semester. We've been going through the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey. At the beginning, we like to remind us of what the premise of the book is. So there's 3 things that after reading this book, I came up with these 3 things. Number 1, effective people do the right thing for the right reasons. We live in a world where I believe that most people look at things from what's popular, what's trending, what is the easy thing to do. Effective people don't really worry about that. They do the right thing and they do it for the right reasons. That's number 1. Number 2, effective people seek to live by the 1% rule. And what I mean by that is, and here's a painful reality, especially if you have an exam today, perfection's a myth. It's a myth. Perfection is not possible. It is a myth. It is something that you will not achieve. But what you are called to do is to get 1% to get better every situation, every day, every relationship. Friendships, you're going to fail your friend today. All right, say you're sorry, get 1% better. If you're married or you're dating, you're going to fail that person today. Okay. That's not the fun thing to do, but get 1% better and say you're sorry. So it is effective people live by the 1% rule. But then also, number 3, habits are developed, and habits require hard work and commitment. So you think of the idea of proactive, the habit 1. If you're going to be proactive, to start that habit, it means that you have to break the habit of being reactive. So every time that you create a new habit, you're usually breaking a bad habit. So getting up early, well, you're breaking the habit of hitting the snooze button 5,000 times. You know, maybe not having coffee after 8 o'clock at night. Well, I like coffee after 8 o'clock at night, and then it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I can't sleep. So the bad habit of like being disciplined and going, okay, maybe decaf is in my future after 8 o'clock at night. Whenever you're trying to create a new habit, you're usually breaking a bad habit. So when we look at this book, there are 7 habits. We've gone through 2. We've gone through be proactive, respond, don't react. We've gone through number 2, which is begin with the end in mind, where your principles, the things that do not change, focus your priorities. Your priorities are the things that do change. We've got engineers in here. We've got nurses in here. We've got teachers in here. We've got business people in here. Right now, your priority is school. That will change in a few years. Everybody just stop. It will change, I promise. You'll get out of school one day. If not, thank you for your money to Cedarville. But the idea of that your priorities will change, your principles never do. Number 3, we're going to hit today, which is put first things first. Then number 4 is think win-win. Number 5 is seek to understand, then to be understood. Number 6 is to synergize. And number 7, Covey calls that to sharpen the saw, which is getting better and better and better and better. So when you look at things, he goes through this model of it. You've got to know who you are before you can be independent. A lot of you just want to be, let me do my own thing. But if you're not looking at principles 1 through 3, respond, don't react, being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, where your principles focus your priorities, and putting first things first, you cannot be independent because you really don't know what you believe. So that's what the first stage is. You become dependent on what you know, on what you believe, so you can be independent. And then you need to be independent before you can actually start being interdependent and collaborating with others. A lot of people just want to be around people, but if you don't know what you believe and you're not okay with being who God created you to be, who you are, you're never going to be that good friend. You're never going to be that worker that comes in and like, I'm going to provide something, because you're probably just going with the flow. So your dependence, your independence, your interdependence, and then where it gets from there is you're just trying to live and get better every single day. So that's Covey in a nutshell. I always like to do that at the beginning, so you're reminded that there is a method to the madness. There is some synergy in what we're looking at. So put first things first. That's what we're talking about today. And the big idea for today is the important is greater than the urgent. the important is greater than the urgent. So first of all, let's break down the important. Important things usually deal with results, right? Studying for an exam is important because there's a result to that exam. It contributes to your mission. Important things contribute to your values. So important things to me, if integrity is really important to me, which it is, because that's important to me, when I look at what's going on, me cheating on my taxes is not going to happen because it's part of my values. And that's what's important. Now, it might be easier just to not claim everything on my taxes, but your important should always be more important than or greater than your urgent. Important things contribute to your goals. Important things are usually difficult. They're important for a reason. Think about that in music. When you're playing music and you're getting better in scales. I don't know how many of you loved scales growing up. I hated it when I was learning to play the trumpet. But the thing is, those were the important things. So my daughter right now is playing trumpet, guitar, and piano. So we hear scales on 3 different instruments every single night. But she's practicing over and over and over again because that's important and it requires work. It's not as much fun as playing the fight song for Cedarville High School. Scales are not as much fun, but they are very, very important. Same thing can be said about your education. Same thing can be said about investing, sports, anything you can do. It is difficult to do the important things. People didn't wake up today and go, you know what, today I think I might do the important. You know, it's usually something that takes a lot of work, and that's the discipline, and you'll see that throughout your life. It requires discipline, important. I should have just gone right into that. And it's also grounded on your principles. The important things are, I think we struggle with identifying what's important in our life. I don't think we struggle with what's urgent in our life. The urgent would be, oh my goodness, there's a pipe leaking in my basement. It didn't happen this morning. There's a pipe leaking in my basement and now there's water. That is urgent, right? I've got to deal with that right away. So the urgent is usually visible. It's very visible. A friend is going through a crisis, and this friend goes through crises every single day, but this friend is going through the crisis. Usually that is not hidden. That is very visible, okay? Urgent is usually visible. It presses on us. It's demanding. A broken pipe is demanding. It is. Now, think about the important side of that. Me taking care of the water softener, checking the well, shocking the well every now and then. If you've ever had a well, you understand what I'm talking about. The idea of making sure the water quality is good so that the pipes don't degrade. So there are important and they're urgent. So they press on us. The urgent, they're demanding. They also insist on action. They're often popular with others. The urgent, they're popular with others. Hey, let's go play intramural sports. Might be urgent, but maybe not important because everybody's doing it. It's usually popular with others. It is often pleasant and easy. Now, pipe fixing is not easy, but it's often pleasant and easy. And what I mean by that is when I make the water stop leaking, I feel accomplished. But when I check the water softener, I don't feel as accomplished. I'm like, I got to carry that 40-pound bag down to the basement, and we need 10 of them for our softener. I really don't want to carry 400 pounds to the basement. But if the pipe were to do, I'm like, oh, look what I just did. I turned the water off. I fixed that pipe. There's the urgent versus the important. And it's also the natural thing to do. We are bent to do the urgent. We are not bent and created. Well, we were created to do the important, but our sinful nature wants to deal with the urgent that's right in front of us. So the question again is, okay, is your important greater than your urgent? So in the next few minutes, what I want to do is just kind of hit on those things and help you understand how you can make the important greater than the urgent. One of the things that you have in front of you is a sheet called the Urgency Index. You don't have to take it now, but in the book, I think this was really, and I was convicted by this, and I will tell you that I have a strong urgency mindset. So do not think that this is something you can, I like the urgent. I like dealing with that. But you need to take this and you need to figure out where you are. Some of you in the room are going to be like, off the chart urgency is the way you do it. And the only reason why you can adjust things is the best leader is a self-aware leader. Okay, I struggle with urgent things, so maybe I need to get a place and close my office door and get behind my office door and just get things done. Because the urgent is, I like dealing with the urgent. I like putting out fires. Should have been a fire person. But the problem with that is I'm not keeping the important the important. So urgency defined, Webster defines it this way. It's defined as a compulsive, chronic, or psychological need for a habit-forming substance or behavior. That's what urgency is. It's like, I've got to feel this. When you have an urgency or any kind of addiction, you usually have anxiety, irritability, unrealistic expectations, and you're unreliable in your actions. All right? That's what it is. So the first thing that you've got to understand is that we all have an urgency addiction in some way. We don't view the important as greater than the urgent. So how do we fix this? How do we make the important greater? Well, first of all, where do you live? Where do you spend your time? It's another handout in front of you. You don't need to try to write all this stuff down, but the idea is you've got 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is the procrastinator, meaning quadrant 1 is that top one right there where it says urgent. It's crises, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects. We're all going to live there. Your life today is probably a lot in this quadrant because you've got exams, you've got papers, you've got different things. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but it's important. It's prevention, relationship building, recognizing new opportunities, planning. Quadrants 3 and 4 are very dangerous. Quadrant 3, it's urgent, but it's not important. So that might be like, hey, social media. That might be a phone call. That might be interruptions instead of you sitting there and studying. Okay, your friend coming up and talking about that Bobby Knight died yesterday probably isn't really the most important thing, but it might be urgent because it's part of the news today. And then quadrant 4 is that one where a lot of us, this is where we go when we binge watch The Office. This is where we go when we binge watch things on Netflix. And it's not always bad, but it's trivia, busy work, some calls, time wasters, pleasant activities. If you want to know where you are right now, where do you spend your time? Do you spend your time? So ranking yourself, and you'll see this later, ranking yourself in what quadrant do you spend your time? Do you find yourself, and this happened at the UD game, I was there with, who was I there with? Zach Forehand. I was at the UD game. We were right there. The student section would have been right over there. And we're at the game. They're heckling, the student sections are heckling Pat and our players. And then as soon as it gets to a timeout and the music's playing, this is what happens. I'm not kidding. It was funny, like how humorous it was. They were like yelling at us, yelling at our players, yelling at the officials. But as soon as that music started and the timeout happened, everybody was looking at their cell phone. I would say we live in a world where your cell phone is really the place where it's not urgent and it's not important, but we like to scroll. It's one of the reasons why, for me, the best thing for me was to get rid of Instagram and Facebook, because I found myself doing that, wasting my time, even in standing in line at Walmart. While I'm waiting at Walmart, nothing else to do. Well, yeah, there's other things else to do. Usually a kid is with me, or usually Danielle's with me. Maybe a conversation might be better. So the idea of that's what it means, the quadrant right there. Here's what the results happen. If you're just in the urgent all the time, if you're always dealing with the broken pipes, you're going to get burned out and stressed. Because if your pipe breaks every day in your basement, that's usually money. So you're going to get stressed. This quadrant's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller if you deal with this one. If you deal with not the urgent but the important, it's vision-driven, balanced, discipline. But if you deal with the urgent, not important, it's very short time. You're going to have broken relationships. And if you deal with the urgent, not important, you're going to get fired from jobs, and it's the most irresponsible way to live. I have caught people on the job before where they're sitting there and they get so addicted to cell phones, they're just scrolling. It's like, man, get to work. Where is the not urgent but important? People who do that, the athletes that do that, the Michael Jordans, the Michael Phelps, all the Mia Hamms, all those different people who do that, the musicians who do that, didn't wake up and go, you know what, I really don't want to look on social media today. They realized the only way I'm going to get better is that I keep the important important. So number one, you got to know where you live. Number two, how do you keep it this way? You practice 1 and 2. You respond, so practice 1. You respond, don't react. So we've already talked about that. Number 2, you have your principles and they focus your priorities. The third thing is you've got to identify your roles. So how do you identify your roles? What are your roles? Well, let me tell you what my roles are. My role right now is I'm an individual, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a church member, I'm the director of campus experience, I'm a colleague at Cedarville. Those are my roles. I've got to define those roles, and then I've got to go into those roles and I've got to create SMART goals. Okay, this week, if I'm going to be a good husband, what do I need to do? I need to do this and this. I'm going to do that this week. This week, to be a good father, what do I need to do? I'm going to do this and this. This week, to be a good church member, what do I have to do? Because things get busy at Cedarville and church takes a back seat. But if you look at Scripture, where does it say the gates of hell will not prevail against? Does it say Cedarville or does it say the church? It says the church. But because a lot of times the urgent at Cedarville outweigh the important because I haven't defined what I need to do in my role as a church member. You set those goals. Have you ever heard of SMART goals? They're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're timely. What I mean, don't set a goal like, hey, I'm going to talk to Danielle every hour of the day. Okay, well, that might be a little unrealistic because sometimes we're sleeping. Okay, just set a goal that makes sense. So like this week, my goal with our kids was I'm going to find 20 minutes with each kid where there's nothing else going on. No TV, no phone, no anything. So for me and Audrey, it's me when I take her to basketball. Me and Keegan, it's when we're talking after everybody goes to sleep because he likes to drink coffee late at night like I do, and Red Bull. But no, I don't drink that Red Bull stuff. But he just wants to stay up and talk. So those are the times. So define your roles. Also, have you ever thought about planning your week instead of your day? Probably most of you looked at your schedule today and go, what do I need to get done today? I'm challenging you, if you're going to put the first things first, is you're going to plan your week instead of your day. So on a Saturday, look at this week, go, okay, what are my roles for this week? I'm a student. I'm a fiance. I'm an organization member. I'm a church member. I'm a part of Renova. Okay, what are 2 things that you should do this week to make those roles and to get those things done on those roles? Set that. We have several books in our office, they're called handouts by Michael Hyatt. They're the little notebook that you could take and write. And we've got them. I'm glad for you to have them. But the goal of the whole thing is to be like, okay, what is my mission? How do I respond, not react? What are my principles? And now, what are my roles for this week? And how do I want to attain them? Because I think a lot of times what happens with the urgent is we quickly allow it to become bigger than the important. Because the urgent's right in front of you. I'm challenging you right now, if you can get into the habit of defining what's important and keeping it more greater or more important than the urgent, things will not be easy, but things will make sense. You will have a greater benefit to others. And then it's the only way that you can move from, I'm okay with who God created me to be, to now I can serve with others. Because if it's always the urgent, you're allowing other people to drive you. If it's the important, you're stepping into something and now you're a voice of reason, you're a voice of collaboration for that person. That's where the important needs to always be greater than the urgent.